or not, and whether the wetland is restored or not. So if people cannot, so that was what was really challenging with the exercise I gave you the other time as well, because I didn't show you changes. So that's very important. Then you want to, in doing the questionnaire design, then we basically rely often on Dillman, who says, okay, first you're going to warm up people. You're going to give them nice, interesting questions that just go, that makes them want to do this questionnaire. Do you know this wetland? Have you visited it? Oh, okay. Or for example, with the wind farms, do you think climate change is a problem? Yeah, so it's something that warms people up. And then you pass to the choice evaluation method, and after that you have all the boring questions. So that when people have already invested a fair bit of time, and that they think that it would be a loss for them to just, they would say, well, now I've just invested so much time, so I might as well finish it. That's when you ask, how much, what's your education, how old are you, where do you live, all these like social demographic factors. Now, very, very briefly, if you want to know more detail, just email me, because when you have many attributes and many levels, if you really want to know how people value every single combination of attributes and levels, you would have to give them 200 choice sets. You're not going to do that. So there's some very effective designs, they call experimental designs, that have been developed that permit you to just extract a very small proportion of all those alternative alternatives. So basically those choices that you were evaluating, that's not me who chose the combination. It's some very fancy statistical program according to some different criteria called balance and orthogonality. So in this case, I just had to give people 18 different management alternatives, and I got 90% of the same information as I would have gotten if I had given them 1,458 management alternatives. And so the choice experiment I did with the locals was a fair bit more complex than what you did, but they know the area. I took time to explain the attributes, and they're illustrated. So they actually did 9 or 8 of these, and I did it myself. So it's limited how many. Usually, what is said when you're doing the census population, you want to have about 300 respondents. But actually with 90 respondents, I got statistically significant results. That means that you can say that there's 99% certainty that this value is different from 0. And therefore could actually publish in a good journal because of that, because there was reliance. And this is an outcome of basically when you do good field study, when you know what you're doing, so you get high quality information. And also the choice experiment just being really effective and yielding a lot of information from each individual. Okay, I think this is an older round of results, but maybe I should just go back here. So I'm actually asking people to value whether they want more hedges, the biodiversity access or not, different kinds of mosquito control, and whether the wetland should be restored medium or advanced, as you saw. Now, actually, one very important, so due to the fact that I spent a lot of time on the field, I understood that this question of mosquito control is really important. This is an attribute that I would so much have left out if it wasn't because I had spent at least a month together with the locals. Usually you don't put in such a, I don't know. You don't, but this thing turned actually really fundamental to understanding people's preferences, the fact that I had, and there are basically 2 different options when you restore a wetland. Either you use the BTE, which is used a lot on the coast, chemical control or natural control, like small fish that eat the fish. And so what you see, for example, okay, now, it was also mentioned, if you know something about something, you value it higher. So I also had some questions about whether people buy organic produce, whether they're environmentally conscious, whether they're higher educated. And I found that, okay, if you are somebody who buys organic produce or recycles, have some sort of environmental awareness and consciousness. And then there's a willingness to pay of 30 euros per annual per person for high biodiversity. And to tell you, this is an area where people don't have a lot of money. But quite interesting, look at this, if you're looking just across the population as a whole, there's no demand for biodiversity, high biodiversity. So if I had not collected data on the information of the respondents, I would just go, there's no demand for high biodiversity. What the heck is going on? But I'll come to that question later. So very important to know. So this also tells you something about, okay, maybe if we're in a Mediterranean biodiversity hotspot, we want to maybe raise some awareness about the benefits and interest of biodiversity. And I went afterwards and asked people, how come people don't value high biodiversity? And people would say, well, I just thought it would be way too wild. And we don't control that as a researcher. We don't know what's going on in people's minds. And so maybe I didn't do enough pre-testing. Maybe I should have done some more pre-testing, and then when I did the surveys, should have said, this is what it means. Okay, very interesting again. So advanced, that's the highest level of wetland restoration. Again, no demand for high degree of wetland restoration. But when you had a choice that allowed for wetland restoration and mosquito control, then there's a demand. So that shows that if you are to be a policymaker, that's going to restore wetland and not be totally, to be politically popular, you need to ensure the population that this is done in conjunction with mosquito control. So this allows us to estimate causal relations, because we have this very fundamental, important attribute in there attached to controlling the mosquitoes. Okay, this is not interesting, that's just dark. Okay, what you've got up here, there are different models. You can look at mean values, how much people estimate, but you can also use what's called random parameter loading models, where you can look at the mean value of an attribute in a population and the spread. So looking, for example, at, why can I not go back? Okay. Mosquito control. For chemical mosquito control, you can see the mean value. People would want to be compensated, minus 21. They want to be compensated 20 euros to be able to accept that. But you see a heterogeneity that goes from plus minus 61. So you have probably about 40% of the sample that would be willing to pay independently of anything else, just pay to have mosquito control. So that even shows, so these are independently. So that means, okay, assuming nothing else changes, there's a willingness to pay of minus 21 plus 61, so about 40 euros for some respondents to have just chemical mosquito controls. And that shows you something about that aversion that people have to mosquitoes. When you then come around to actually estimating the welfare benefit to society as a whole, you construct scenarios. You say, okay, how are we going to say? Assume then that we have, then you say, okay, we're going to have more hedges, we're going to have a little bit more biodiversity, and we will have wetland restoration. You add the willingness to pay together, and you come up with so this is the overall welfare benefit per person of what I call a high impact management scenario, that which was most preferred. The wetland restored to 2/3 with natural mosquito control, intermediate amount of hedges, it accommodates passive recreation, biodiversity managed at intermediate level. So then you can do that in different scenarios, and then you can choose, you can weigh different possibilities. Okay, so what I want to say with this slide is that basically the result about biodiversity raises fundamental questions regarding stated preference methods. What do people understand by more birds, fish, insects, etc.? I should say a point with regard to that. I did use fish, birds, I was very generic. I didn't mention flagship, iconic species, because then I would have inflated willingness to pay, and I probably have gotten artificially high. If I'd said, what are you willing to pay for the roller, which is flagship species in that region, then I would have inflated. So it's recommended that you stay as general as possible, and don't, what are you willing to pay, say, for the dolphins, and people are willing to pay more to save the dolphins than the tuna, and it's just, that's not what it's about. Okay, research challenges. It's your perception that influences preferences and not necessarily the good subjective characteristics. So you want to be aware of the pitfalls. And there are questions of validity. We have discussed all that. People go, is this right or is this wrong? Or I want to please the interviewer. I want to make him think that I'm really ecologically aware, so I'm just going to go, yeah, I'm willing to pay a lot. So you want to be sensitive to all these aspects. Then last thing, it's really fun to do a valuation survey because you just get to meet so many, or you want to meet all the relevant stakeholders. Here's Madame Calais, a landowner, 500 hectares, who is the most progressive of all the landowners, and she had her land flooded, and after it was flooded, she had a really hard time getting rid of the water, so she said, oh, whatever, I'll leave it there at one part of her parcel. And then she found that there's suddenly all these docks and everything was coming back and the soil quality was increasing, and so she was like, wow, this is amazing. And that actually triggered this whole process of whether wetlands should be restored or not. Now, my policy recommendations that came out of that was to those very skeptical policymakers is there is a real demand. You can increase the well-being or the welfare of local inhabitants by 100 euros per person more per year, 10,000 inhabitants, you scale it up, that's your total benefit. Weigh that against the costs and other benefits of wetland restoration. So as I said, but we only look at certain attributes, things that are really easy for people to value in this setting. And it was also driven by, it was basically a landscape fund that funded me, so I had to have the landscape element, and so I didn't value regulating services, water purification, etc. But when you do a cost-benefit analysis of wetland restoration, you have a whole range of benefits and costs. So on the cost side, you have foregone agricultural revenues, restoration costs. On the benefits, you will have more water purification, aquifer replenishment, because as it is today, water is simply just pumped out of the underground aquifer, dumped in the Rhone, and just ends up in the Mediterranean. It reduces the risk of flooding because it functions as a sponge. You have less pumping and dike maintenance, and you have new recreational opportunities and landscape amenities. Now, here comes the challenge. I want you. Now we're trying to value the benefits of these things that I have not valued in my choice experiments. So assume that we know with accuracy, and we can communicate, no, not necessarily. We know with accuracy to what extent the groundwater quality in the value improves relative to today, and what the cost is of, I don't want to say too much. So what methods, so in your groups, or whatever, whichever way you choose to do it, I'd like to reflect upon what valuation methods could be used to value increase in groundwater quality and increase in water availability in a region that's really dry and a region where there's high demand for more water because tourism is expanding and they want to expand the golf course and all the rest of it. So, how can we...
Okay, so I'd like to propose that we make two groups. So some people sit around here, and some people sit around here, and we maybe have Dolph and Vanya over here, and Nick and Ersten over here. And we have group one answering the first question, and we have group two answering the second question. And if all of you guys sit around in groups and discuss it for 15 minutes, and then we'll have some feedback. Okay?
I'm just looking for that. I'm going to put up a little overview of valuation methods to help you.
It might also be a good idea, Natalie, if we could keep the questions on the board, because
Yeah.
I'm called Benham. We could keep the questions on the board.
Yes, of course. I was just going to, oh yeah, I should have printed out, I'm sorry. Did I do that? You can just click on the side. Oh, somebody should have told me that many years ago. No, that's what we're looking at. Okay. So we get into groups. Come over here. Come over here.
You?
So, just to clarify, so if we can get into two groups, you can have a couple of people just to come and sit over here. Come and join the group. So I think you guys, where we say, assume that we know with accuracy that the wetland restoration replenishes the underground aquifer, how can you put a value on the quantity of freshwater generated? This group works on that question, and if you have this group working on the first question, assume that the groundwater quality in the valley improves, and to what extent, what methods could you use to value such improvements?
I can also just give you some hints. If you don't have any idea, we'll move on to the next slide. Yes, because we know how much water is being pumped every day out of the wetland to dry it in our agricultural fields. So we know how much water will be generated every year, rainwater in quantity. Sorry. Yeah. Does anyone have any idea for the first question?
I think we're all going to work together on this instead by the sound of things. So if we let Vanya and you go take the lead, get to the front, and we'll discuss it in one big group instead.
Okay, so groundwater quality in the valley improves. To what methods could you use to value such improvements? And there was one suggestion here, clever one, which was avoided cost. Basically, what would it take you to clean that water? What does it take you to, what does it cost to clean that water? There's a problem of water quality. You want to have people be able to drink the water. Well, probably you're going to have to install a water purification plant, or maybe there is a water purification plant installed that costs this much and this much to operate every year. So here you're using the avoided cost method. What would you do? You avoid paying for, or it's actually called, it's called a replacement. I'm mixing all. Basically, what do you avoid paying? Yeah, for the fact that you would have to clean that. You have to clean that water. You have to clean the water in different. You have to clean the water in some way, and now the wetland, as a purifying function, can clean it. So you look at what it would cost, what it costs actually to do it in a different way. Will you retain that for future? When you think about, when you're looking at an ecosystem that you know it furnishes a set of services, and then try to conceptualize the value, then think about, okay, if that, it could also be the flooding. Imagine that we want to avoid this, we want to avoid flooding our valley, so we build dikes, we build higher dikes, because there are more extreme weather events. Now we avoid the cost of building higher dikes. That's an implicit benefit of that wetland. Is it clear? So every day the landowners pump a lot of water out of to drain it so